Vietnam, and I came back, and my 2 novels are both about Vietnam, loosely based on my own experiences. And my collection of short stories called Saying Things are all somewhat autobiographical, but it's important to make a distinction between autobiographical and autobiography. I think Mark Twain is often autobiographical, but he's never really writing autobiography. And as I mentioned to Steve earlier today, there's a famous newspaper saying that I think Mark Twain, whether or not he heard of, paid homage to, and that is, you never let the facts get in the way of a good story. So something being autobiographical is that's a starting point, and then you make up the facts you need when you're writing fiction to fit the needs of the story. And even with Mark Twain, even when he was writing nonfiction, say like Innocents Abroad or Roughing It, he made up facts, and he expected his readers to understand that that was being done. He was not a journalist transcribing stuff. Ernest Hemingway began a career as a journalist who switched to fiction. At one point said that he did that because in fiction you can better tell the truth than you can in nonfiction, which is something I very much agree with.
Okay, so how did this particular career lead you to Olivia Langdon and her life?
That had to do with my co-writer, Michelle. Michelle and I have been good friends for, I think, 16 years now. And a couple years ago, she had hinted often she'd like to work on a book with me. She's a freelance writer. And she publishes a magazine called Lake Effect, which focuses on arts in and around Rochester. And finally, I gave it to her. Suggested, and we spent a lot of time talking about various subjects we might do, taking into consideration, how much does it cost to travel to a certain place, and how much access are we likely to have to the documents we need, and so forth. And in talking to Michelle, it became absolutely clear that if we were going to work on a book together, it was going to be about a woman, not about a man. So that, eliminated half our potential subjects. And Michelle had read some of Mark Twain, but was, unlike me, she was not a big Mark Twain fan. But since Libby was from Elmira, which is about 90 miles away from Rochester, was therefore accessible, and since so much of the documents we would need are available either online or been published in book form, for example, every newspaper interview that Mark Twain ever did has been published in a book. So we wouldn't have to spend months and months and months hunting down newspapers, some of which, for example, in Australia, we would never be able to find. What we had to do was go online to Amazon.com and look for like 99-cent copies of Mark Twain interviews. You could buy a lot of cheap books there, and that's what we did. And then we spent a lot of time reading that and meeting and comparing notes and going over. But if it wasn't for Michelle, I doubt that we would have ended up writing about a woman. I will say that for a long time I wanted to write a biography because, if I could do what I want to do in life, since I can't be a Major League Baseball player, the second choice would be to be a writer of fiction, particularly of novels. I'm a fan of the novel. I love writing them. And but it's a lot easier to sell nonfiction for various reasons. You contact a publisher, you contact another magazine. If you say you have fiction, they'll say, well, write it and then send it to me, we'll let you know. But if it's nonfiction, you can work out whether or not they're really interested in the subject or not. And then they can give you information about exactly what angle they're interested in or not interested in, what length they would want and not want. So, even though unless you're a really famous writer who makes money for your publisher, you're always writing on speculation. But it certainly helps a lot if the publisher or the editor at the publishing house says, yeah, I'm very interested in that topic, especially if you do it this way rather than that. And when I had published 2 books with this publisher, McFarlane, Sex and Manifest Destiny. And I expected that to sell well because everybody's interested in Manifest Destiny. And prior to that, a book on a writer named Richard Yates. Does anybody here know who Richard Yates was? Okay, he's not well known. He had a great deal of respect from other writers in this country, Kurt Vonnegut, William Styron, Richard Russell, a lot of other people tell you one of America's
Well, he
great
wrote
writers.
Revolutionary Road,
Yeah,
right?
Revolutionary Road was
People
made,
may know as a movie if they know.
right, a movie with Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet made a few years ago. Didn't do terribly well, but it was a big budget movie and got a lot of attention. And probably made Richard Yates better known than he previously had been when he was alive. But he had the unfortunate tag of being a writer's writer, and that means two things. Other writers like you, or like your writing, and the public does not buy your writing.
So I'm going to just chase you back to the question, which is, so why, you were a Mark Twain fan, you said, and she was not necessarily, but she did want to write a book about a woman. So you kind of, is that how you reached your, aside from all these other considerations of research and nonfiction?
Yeah, it was something we could agree on, and it probably wasn't the first choice for either of us. But you know, a piece of advice I give to many people, I teach courses at various non-college places for people who want to be writers, which is better than teaching college students, because they're not there to get street credit, they're not there because the category says they have to take that course, they're there because they really want to write. I know that people here teaching courses, and if they've also taught at college, I expect they would agree with me and stuff. It was not our first choice for either person, but again, to get back to point, as I tell those people, the key in writing fiction is not to come up with interesting characters, but rather come up with characters your readers will be interested in. And if you think about it, we all become interested in people who aren't all that interesting. Okay? Relatives, neighbors, co-workers. Okay? We're interested in them, we talk about them, we gossip about them, and sometimes our gossip is how boring they are. And we still talk about them. And I felt that I had wanted to write a biography for a while, and I felt that, you know, if I'm going to live with this person for a year, okay, don't tell Mark Twain, but I lived with Livy for a year, okay, I would become interested in, and I became very, very interested in her. I didn't think you would become, now I also think in a lot of ways she was very interesting. Part of that, unfortunately, is she had a very interesting husband, okay, and I strive right from the opening introduction or the preface to my book to point out that I want to write a book about Livy, about Olivia Langdon Clemens, not about Mark Twain. And I tried to do that as much as I could. And I tried to exclude Mark Twain as much as I can. But obviously you can't. Any wife you write about, you have to write about the husband. Any husband you write about, you have to write about the wife. Although I will say this, most biographers of Mark Twain, I think, found it easier to exclude stuff about Livy than I found it to exclude stuff about Mark Twain. Okay.
Yeah, I agree. As someone who's also written about people involved with Mark Twain, he does tend to come into center stage when, not even when you don't want him to, partly because he just describes everything so well. He will describe a situation in which Livy is involved you know, so brilliantly that you're not going to listen to what Livy says so much. And it's a handicap for anyone who was, I think, was within the orbit of Mark Twain. But I also wanted to emphasize that this is the first biography of Livy on focusing on her, doing what Marty and Michelle have tried to do. Really, at least keep Mark Twain somewhere on the fringes and focus on her life. And why do you think that's been? I know there have been sort of joint biographies or stories about their courtship and their relationship, but why never a book like the one that you put together?
I think the reason is, it'll probably be different for different writers, but there is a tendency that if you make a commitment to write a certain book, that you feel you'll have to stick to that. And if people, they're interested in Mark Twain, they're going to write something about Mark Twain, even if they were to find somebody else, the Reverend Twitchell, for example, very interesting, they've made this commitment to to write about it. I will point out, I have an opinion about one of Mark Twain's books that I'm not alone on. I think it's great underrated classic is Put in Ed Wilson. I think about 2/3 of that. Now, he started out, as many of you know, to write a short story about two Siamese twins. And then he created a secondary character, a black woman who's very light-skinned, who's a slave in Missouri in, I think, the 1840s, whose job it is to take care of a newborn baby for her white master. Her newborn son, about the same age, very light, and she switches the baby. So her son is raised free, and the white parent's son is raised as a slave. And, you know, if you take out the unfortunate part about these Siamese twins come to town, and stuff, I think you have a great novel. I think you also need a better title. Put in there, Wilson is, I understand why he used the title. There's a character, a young boy named Wilson, who some people think is scatterbrained, so they give him the nickname Put in Head. Yeah. And he's clearly not Mark Twain, you know, has treats this guy very well. But what Mark Twain did there, he didn't stick with the book he set out to write. He actually set out to write a short story that became a novel, and then the novel was about somebody else. And I think that's important. There's a writer named Tim O'Brien who I know writes about the Vietnam War. Some of you may know he's best known for the things they carried, and he won the National Book Award for going after Cacciato. And he's told me several times, he said, you don't write what you know. You write to figure out what it is you know. The act of writing is an act of discovery. And I feel the same way. And there was a lot, you know, it was Michelle who steered me to writing about a woman. It was I who steered her to having this woman have something to do with Mark Twain. But there was a lot I discovered about her. Well, one of the early things I knew about her before